Hey guys, this is Richard Chu. Welcome back to Chu's Views. This is the first Friday of the month, and that means it's time for This Month with the Mayor. Mayor Johnson, good morning.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Well, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing wonderful. Whatever that little bug is that's bouncing around the city of Chicago, somehow I've been able to escape it. But they got my wife and all three of my children. Unfortunately, my 12-year-old Ethan got the worst of it, but I'm feeling great.
All right. Well, they've got to keep you away from getting it, so good on them. Welcome to the show, and listen, I come right out of the gate and say to you, Monday night I had the opportunity to be there in the audience, and you were busy at the end talking with folks, but I had a chance to be in the audience at the WCPT My Block event with Jamal Cole, and I just want to come right out and say a couple things that I've been saying on the air throughout the course of the week. You guys, the whole panel did a great job in fielding the questions and letting everybody know that all of you all who are on the panel were serious about the city of Chicago and our communities moving forward. And I've been leaning into that all week in terms of community, in terms of the importance of it, and in terms of not being splintered off by what's going on a federal level. And that's trying to trickle down to some very specific parts of the city, of the country. The city of Chicago is one of the cities that's in the crosshairs. So thank you for showing that leadership Monday, and all the craziness is coming at you and all the things that you got to navigate, the good, the bad, and the ugly, frankly. I thought you guys did a great job, and particularly you were showing the leadership that the city needs to see from you right now. So kudos to you in that space. What was your impression of the panel and the group of people that were there?
Well, thank you for the recognition of the strength of our city and how, in this moment, we are not going to surrender our humanity, and that's really what I believe the extremism in this country would like for us to do, to see everyone else as a threat or as an object, and therefore providing permission for the type of unfair treatment that unfortunately this country and the world has participated in. The panel was absolutely exceptional. I'm grateful to Jamal Cole and My Block, My Hood, My City, and their partnership with WTTW to bring me in, to give the community an opportunity to ask direct questions to me and to anyone else who will listen around the things that are most pressing for them. I thought it was an incredible display of the consciousness of Chicago, and it was a more accurate depiction of how the residents of the city are seeing this moment. And again, each and every one of the panelists brought a level of expertise that reflects what I always call the soul of Chicago, our diversity of thought, the diversity of experiences, the different, again, demographics as well as age, representation. All of that was on display at that public forum. And then the public audience being able to see, experience it, and touch it for themselves. That is the type of interactions that I believe we need to have versus some of these smaller news bites that really don't get at the essence of what we are facing in this moment, and quite frankly, what people actually care about.
Yeah, that the sound bites and the clips and the headlines really don't get. I was having a dinner with a friend the other night that said the clickbait is causing so many distracting moments for people. They don't get deeper into what's really the substance, and you guys did a really, really good job of that. Mayor Johnson, talk a little bit, and you mentioned this, as did Jamal and others on the panel the other night, why it's so important right now that communities stay connected and why they have to be not just working together, but making sure that they're reaching out to others. Talk about why community is so important to you as mayor of the city of Chicago, but also to our greater conversations when it comes to some of our national issues.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Look, our interdependence on one another is far stronger than we realize. And making sure that community remains connected, it's critical to, building a much more inclusive economy. So, for instance, right now we are moving already, believe it or not, into our discussions around the budget for 2026. And, we came off of an open, very democratic process that led to the budget that we are living in right now. But there are clearly desires and demands that the people of Chicago have. And, to be quite blunt, there aren't enough resources to really provide the type of economic stability that's needed in every community. And the reason why that's critical, and to your question around community, is that when communities suffer or where particular groups suffer, it will have an impact on the rest of us. One of the best examples that I can give is that, when I was, playing a little Division III college football, I remember jamming up my shoulder. And at 18, 19, Chu, I don't, it didn't hurt. I'll say it like that. Though there was some gnawing, in my shoulder. At 48, it bothers me. and let me just tell you, I don't know if you've ever experienced this or anyone else my age, that if there's a particular area on your body that is ailing, it will have impact on the rest of your body.
Yep.
And again, 30 years ago, it was a shoulder, kind of bothered me here or there. Now there's an entire adjustment that I have to make as a result of not getting the treatment that I should have received 20, 30 years ago. And so this is a similar element when it comes to community, that one part of a body that is not whole will have consequence on the rest of us. And so when you have unemployment, for instance, for young black men, that looks like the Great Depression era numbers for white men, at which our country called it a national crisis, by the way, when unemployment had reached 30% amongst white men. And you have that type of concentrated unemployment within one particular group, it will have an impact on our society. And so that's why youth employment, our investment in education, bringing new development into the city of Chicago, these are ways in which we can, approach these ailments that exist within the city of Chicago so that there isn't a heavier load being carried one way or the other simply because we refuse to address a critical issue. I hope that makes some sense.
It makes total sense. And again, I say this often, Mayor Johnson, I have to stop taking notes and listen to what you're saying and what others are saying when we have them as guests. So I want to connect something to what you just said to our future. The word I wrote down was compensation. And our body's I know exactly what you're talking about in terms of injuries. If you don't get one fixed, then it's going to eventually, your body's going to compensate and something else is going to go awry. And I link that to this phrase of a rising tide lifts all ships. The counter to that is, if you don't lift everybody up, somebody else is going to suffer. But a lot of people think that when you lift up a particular community or group of folk, that it's taking from another group. And I've never, as an economist and ones that studied, financial matters, I've never seen that be the truth. It's always the opposite. When you lift up the areas that need to be lifted up, and it's common sense. If you drive a car down the street, it's got 4 tires. If one of them's flat, eventually you're going to wreck something. So let's put some air in all the tires so we can run down the road smoothly. And a lot of folks don't get that.
Yes, that's it. It's unfortunate that sort of paradigm or mindset matriculates and unfortunately metastasizes our body and our city. What I will say, though, is that there are examples where people actually recognize this value. I'll give you an example: youth employment, for instance. We're positioned to hire up to 29,000 young people this summer. It's a 43% increase since I've been in office. Last year, we hired almost 28,000. 10 of the top neighborhoods where young people were hired from were on the west and south sides. The one that I like to highlight the most is the Austin neighborhood, not just because that's where I reside, where my family, we're raising our family here. It's because when you look at the reduction of violence in Austin and this police district, there's been a recognizable decline in violence. I actually believe that there is a connection between the fact that almost 1,700 young people had summer jobs. And when we recognize that part of our approach, that, again, making investments in communities that have historically been ignored, that pressure, that weight does not pull us or drag us into this economy of despair. And it's why I've been focused on development and projects. Just last year, 2024, $13 billion of just new projects that are on the line, 45,000 construction jobs. When all these projects are done, it's 3,700 or so permanent jobs. The more we recognize the equitable distribution of wealth and the balance that creates for our society and our long-term sustainability, people begin to have lived experiences, where they don't believe that someone else benefiting from these investments is somehow a repudiation or a slight against them. I think the last thing that I'll say here, because you raised an important point, that there really is this insurgent, if you will, of divisiveness that we have to plow through as a city of descendants of slaves and immigrants and indigenous people. Chicago, we have to be the shining light or the beacon, the shining example of what it means to have a diverse economy, where a Black Haitian immigrant and a Potawatomi woman and Jewish, Italian, Polish, Chinese immigrants, descendants of slaves from migrating from the South. I don't know about you, Chu. My family is a part of the second migration, where many of the first Blacks who migrated landed on the South Side, and the second migration of Black folks primarily on the West Side.
Yep.
This is the unique story of Chicago, where our collective communities have come together to create a real balanced, society. And that's essentially what my budget and the work that we're doing collectively through community is working to capture, where every single neighborhood has everything that it needs and deserves.
One of the things that you said the other night, which leads me to this next question, and I'm part of my family too, same part of that same migration, and I'm proud of it, and more people need to be aware of it and how it's benefited our country. That being said, you've got some headwinds coming your way that you're going to lean into, along with mayors of other cities such as Boston and New York and Denver, in terms of this word sanctuary cities and policies, and how Congress wants to drag you guys into to testify. And so talk a little bit about that if you can. I don't want to have any predisposed thinking on it, but what does this all mean?
Well, first, I will just say that there are other mayors and governors, congressional leaders across this country that recognize that sanctuary status is not it's not a term that we take lightly. It's something that I know, as a mayor of Chicago and mayors that existed before me, reacted and held strong the view and the belief that Mayor Harold Washington had over 40 years ago, that as our country unfortunately began to create I would just say unfriendly economic conditions in Central and South America, as the so-called spread of socialism and communism was the term of that time, and unfortunately, the sovereign nations in Central and South America were destabilized because of foreign policy, and Mayor Harold Washington understood that, and that's why he stood up at that time over 40 years ago and said that if our federal government is going to behave in the way it behaves, the cities of America have to unite and come together to stand up and resist those policies, but also provide sanctuary as a consequence of those policies. We should be opening our arms. Now, 40 years later, I don't know if Mayor Harold Washington and leaders of that time fully understood the implications of what they did. I guess, we may not ever know, but I will say that I do very much appreciate and honor that legacy. Now, what it means for today, we've made this point very clear, that if Congress was absolutely serious about the crises at the border, and in addition to the crises at the border, if they were serious about lifting democracy and creating real economic stability across the globe, it would better reflect that in policy. There is a bipartisan bill that passed the Senate that the House rejected at the behest of the current president. That policy alone could resolve many of the things that people have angst about today. As far as what it means in terms of just representation in this moment, Michelle Wu, I do want to lift her up, the mayor of Boston. We claim her. She's one of us. She's born and raised in Illinois. I believe she was raised in Barrington.
Yeah.
She just had a baby. We had a strong relationship with her. Mayor Johnson and Mayor Adams and I, we had to deal with the brunt of those buses coming from Texas, the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, and we suffered through the challenges of that. What we're going to uphold as welcoming cities essentially is that we don't interfere with anything that the federal agents do, right? So if there's someone here that's undocumented and they are convicted of a crime, they are subject to deportation. That is the law. Other administrations have done that. True, I'm sure we could have a longer conversation about the Obama years, but the numbers bear out, right? I mean, it's very clear of the efforts that the Obama administration put forward during his time. And there were people who, took exception to the amount of deportations that happened under his administration, but not to just single him out. Every president has had a strategy to deport individuals, and in particular individuals that have, caused harm in our respective cities. What the full motivation behind this is, quite frankly, I believe, is just is a way to further insert division within communities to get us fighting for the limited resources in which the interests of the ultra wealthy want to make available. And I see this as an opportunity, in closing, that it's not just a conversation around immigration. This is a conversation about working people and dignity in our society. And as much as we know that, laws have to be upheld, I would wish, the oversight committee would spend more time discussing how illegal guns are getting into the streets across America and finding ways in which we can hold those entities accountable. Because I can tell you, there's a lot more tragedy that I can point to in the city of Chicago and cities across America at the hands of illegal guns and illegal weapons. So I'm going to, stand firm and work with these other mayors to continue to uphold the values of working people. That, again, we won't interfere with FBI, with federal agents, but we're certainly not going to deputize law enforcement locally to behave as ICE agents. It's not something that is, quite frankly, even manageable, and we don't see the dignity in forcing local law enforcement to walk around and ask individuals what their immigration status is.
Yeah. So a couple things that you said that just made me smile. The first one was stand with dignity. And that's one of the things that Monday night I noticed. And I spoke to a few folks after the event. And one of the things that I saw in you, which I'm proud of, and I will say this is sort of your big brother in this moment. I'm proud of how you've been standing up and reinserted the spine of our ancestors in your body, that even with the imperfections of your administration, which is part of the deal, and the imperfections of doing what you have to do that you signed up for, you have been showing that steel in your spine. And I want to applaud you for that, because I know that folks are coming at you left, right, top, and bottom, and continue to do that, because that's what leadership is. And that's what people want to see from you, from the other Mayor Johnson in Baltimore, from our mayors in all of our blue cities, and our governors throughout the country. They want that, Mayor Johnson. I'm telling you, imperfections are there. That's a reality of living. You know that. You're raising a family. But the country wants to see us fight back. They want to see folks like you put that steel in your spine and let folks know we are going to lead from the front, and we're going to stay connected. So I have to give you your flowers in that space. Be darned whatever else is coming at you right now, and how those things are landing on your desk. Talk a little bit about, as we wrap up today, talk a little bit about how you are working with some of the other mayors. And I know that's a big question, and we'll get back to that in a future show, but how you're working with some of the other mayors to share the resource of ideas and solutions.
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, there are mayors across the globe, quite frankly, that I've been in communications with. Just a couple of days ago, I spoke with Mayor Valerie Plante in Toronto, the first woman ever elected mayor in Montreal, Quebec, the first woman, 365-year history, something like that. And she has done an exceptional job in Montreal. Spoke with Mayor Chow in Toronto. These are, leaders that I'm in communication with because of our shared interests around just our global economy. The 20% of the world's fresh water is right in our front yard between Lake Michigan and the St. Lawrence River. Again, in working with mayors across this country, Mayor Johnston is just one example. Mayor Baz, Brandon Scott, Paul Young. I mean, I can just go down the list of mayors who are all working towards solving the local challenges, whether it's building more affordable housing. So, for instance, we have a brand new model that we're using based upon what has been done in Maryland, green social housing. And essentially, this is, a way in which we can establish essentially a nonprofit public developer that will be governed by a board that is accountable to the government to build more affordable rental units, right? I mean, these are, things that are being done in Atlanta as well. And Paul Young in Memphis is working on similar models. And so I just want to lift up the fact that, whether it's immigration or housing, that I'm in constant communication with mayors. There's Brandon Scott in Baltimore, for instance. He's in his second term now, but he has a very similar disposition as I do, investing in young people. And so his youth summer employment jobs have increased significantly, and homicides have gone down in his city. On this issue, I will say this. When the buses were coming, and no one had an answer for the buses. No one, literally no one, the federal government, no one. I'm in a cabinet meeting, Drew, and I'm just talking out loud. I'm just saying, look, there's got to be a way in which we can better regulate these buses that are coming through. There's just, the Greyhound bus cannot just show up in Chicago whenever it wants from St. Louis. And so absolutely the law department sends a note up and says, the mayor, you're absolutely right. That's how we came up with the bus ordinance. Mm-hmm. That bus ordinance that ultimately regulated when buses can arrive to try to establish some order. Municipalities around the state took on that same bus ordinance. Denver put one together similarly, in New York and other places. And so it was an idea that came out of a cabinet meeting here in Chicago that the White House even recognized, like, man, we appreciate that you at least came up with something. And as a result of that, that's when, I don't know if people remember how dangerous this was. The governor of Texas sent an entire airplane, multiple airplanes around the country with asylum seekers on these airplanes. And what ended up happening as well, no one knew that you can fly a private charter plane into a city without disclosing who or what's on that plane.
Yep.
I mean, this is a matter of national security here, right? International security. And this is how mad this individual was. He spent roughly almost $225 million just to send, asylum seekers and undocumented individuals around the country to prove a point that he didn't have to. And so it's through these shared experiences where, we developed ways in which we could build out shelters. In fact, there are cities throughout Canada who were dealing with similar crises, used our model in terms of temporary shelter to respond to the crisis as well. And I will say this last thing, something that came out of the new arrivals mission. We built a one system initiative to respond to homelessness in this city. And for years, Chu, I'm sure you're aware of this, people call 311 because they are unhoused. Right now, there's not a single person in our city that is called 311 that doesn't have shelter right now.
Yeah.
And so, we have built, beds, and we have worked with the state to come up with this single one system initiative. The last thing that I'll say, out of these conversations and out of these crises, we have found hope. And that's what I'm living in right now, is that what people mean for evil, we can find good out of it. And again, ensure that the dignity of humanity doesn't get lost, even during very difficult times like these.
Absolutely. Mayor Johnson, appreciate you being with us this morning. Great event on Monday. And I know that you've got to run, but it's always great to talk with you. And I'm glad that you're taking on the leadership that you have to take on, connecting with other mayors and governors and other elected officials throughout the country to make things as best as we can during this crazy time. We're here for you. We're here to support and encourage you and constructively criticize you as needed. But stay in the fight. You know that we got you, and we look forward to talking to you again next month to see what's been happening in your world over the next 30 days. So thanks for being with us, Mayor Johnson.
You are certainly welcome. Chicago, we will continue to lead the way, to be an example for the rest of the world. And I'm grateful to have an audience in a space like this to be able to communicate and to your point, challenge to ultimately make us stronger. So thank you again for the space, and look forward to talking to you in a month.
That's right. All right. Be safe, Mayor. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.